So I'm settling into this new quarantine reality, starting to feel like fall outside, the leaves are changing color, the weather is cooling, and really starting to hit my stride as far as reading goes, which is kind of good, considering this past month of reading Korean works in translation has been a bit of a challenge at times. I mean, you have the surreal storytelling of Untold Night and Day with its overlapping stories and repeated phrases used throughout. There's the slightly off-kilter short story collection, Bluebeard's First Wife, which, like her first story collection, Flowers of Mold, that I read, I find strangely slippery to hold on to. I mean, the stories, not the book itself. And then there's the violence of Enko's Bad Friends, which is frankly Saturday morning cartoons when you compare it to Keum Suk Gendry-Kim's latest graphic novel. Grass is all the trigger warnings and an incredibly difficult book to read. It is horrifying, brutal, unflinching, unrelenting, unbelievably sad as it follows the life of one Lee Ok-sun, who herself says, "I have never known happiness from the moment I came from my mother's womb." And after reading this, I'm not about to disagree with her. And this was an incredible read. This isn't misery porn. There's still an aspect of hope despite the unimaginable cruelty that would be part of her life for almost all of her life. And I think it helps because we're introduced to Lee Ok-sung in the novel's present as Keum Suk Gendry-Kim is trying to coax her story out of her. After living for nearly 55 years in China, she's returned to her home in South Korea to live in the house of sharing, thanks to the help of a TV station that was filming a docudrama about the plight of Korean comfort women. And that's how she first came to the attention of Keum Suk Gendry-Kim. And so we meet her now in her late 80s, still lucid, still politically active, still fighting. It should be said the House of Sharing is a nursing home and living museum for comfort women in South Korea. Now, comfort women is a direct translation for the Japanese euphemism of prostitute. But really what we're talking about is sex slave. Women as young as 12, mostly Korean, forced into sexual service for the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II in a state-controlled human trafficking operation. I mean, let that sink in for a bit. Wide-scale, government-sanctioned rape. Estimates vary, but there is anywhere between 50 to 400,000 girls who were forced into becoming comfort women for the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II. Many were lured with false promises of better work at factories or restaurants, and others were simply abducted. And that's what happened to Lee Ok-sung, 15, on her way to the store. Abducted, picked up by two men, and shipped off to the remote Chinese province of Yangji. There in Yangji, she remembers hardly being fed, eating rice that was like eating beach sand. Sent to sleep with no blankets, shivering in the cold, working out in the field. Many just caught cold and died. Others died trying to escape. And was there at age 15 that she was first raped. She hadn't even had her first period yet. Lee Ok-sung would soon be sent to a comfort station where she would be forced to service Japanese soldiers for many years. There, women got pregnant, had their children snatched away from them and given to childless Japanese couples. Venereal diseases were rampant, the treatments archaic. And this would continue until the eventual surrender of the Japanese after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The comfort station would be abandoned, the women left to fend for themselves. Shunned as whores, they dispersed across the country and were forced to beg just to get by, until Soviet soldiers would flood into the region, raping and killing many more of these women. So far, pretty unrelenting and grim, but we know that Lee Ok-sung survives. There must be hope somewhere there, right? For Lee Ok-sung, that would be a man that was kind to her while she was in the camps. She would eventually find him. They would get married, and then he decides to run off almost immediately to join the Korean Volunteer Army, leaving her behind to take care of his younger siblings as well as his ailing parents, which she did until they died. She worked tirelessly, but never heard from him once the entire time, not knowing if he was alive or dead, and would continue to do so for nearly 10 years, at which point she found out that he had actually returned from the army, married, and was raising a family of his own, expecting his 4th child already. He never bothered to contact her, just simply assumed that she would have left long ago. I mean, seriously, come on. She was married off again. This time she would find that her husband was a gambler and a drinker, and she already had 2 children that she raised as their own, and she would do that for nearly 50 years. It was a long life of struggle, and problems, and it doesn't end when she finally gets to the house of sharing in South Korea either. But deep breath. Okay, it's been one heck of a month reading Korean works in translation. I want to give away one more book. So let's make it easy. This time out, all you have to do is subscribe, leave a comment down below, but the first word in your comment has to start with the letter G. A little arbitrary, I know, but I thought I'd narrow down the pool of potential winners this time out. So anyway, this will be our little secret. Don't spoil it in the comments either. Okay, back to Lee Ok-sung, in her late 80s, living in the house of sharing, still a staunch advocate for comfort women, still protesting in front of the Japanese embassy, still demanding justice. In Japan, despite years of issuing apologies, the official government stance is that there is no evidence that comfort women were ever taken against their will. Japanese lawmakers would still spout claims that they had talked to Japanese soldiers who would say comfort women would thank them profusely for their ability to send money back home. In 2015, Japan and South Korea would reach an agreement on the issue of comfort women. Japan apologized and set up a victims fund of $9 million. Now, nowhere in that did they use the term sex slave or acknowledge the abduction of women against their will. This was supposed to solve the issue finally and irreversibly. In exchange for the money, South Korea agreed never to bring this issue up in international forums and that they would remove the comfort woman statue from the embassy in Seoul. But none of the surviving comfort women were even consulted during the negotiations. And it's not like they even wanted money. Frankly, that's not even what they got. Currently, prosecutors are investigating allegations that the former head of the Korean Council for Justice and Remembrance embezzled funds to buy a property and send his daughter to school in the United States. The council has since apologized for some accounting flaws. For many, it's clear that the Japanese government wants to rewrite history, that there was no forced recruitment of women into sexual slavery, and that all comfort women were willing volunteers. They're also working tirelessly out in the world to stop activist efforts to recognize and support comfort women. They're demanding that statues of comfort women be removed in places like the United States, the Philippines, South Korea, and they've even threatened to withhold UNESCO funding to prevent comfort women documents to be entered into the Memory of the World's Register. This is a global effort to preserve historical documents. And with their surviving comfort women slowly dying out, there's this sense that Japan can simply just wait them out. This is a beautiful work. I mean, the broad black brushstrokes are just beautifully done, unfussy, and yet somehow just creating so much detail, so much sense of space. I swear some of these frames look like they're black and white photos that have been posterized back to one color. I don't even know how she does this. And the matter is heavy, but Keum Suk Gendry-Kim just does such a great job. In the translation by Janet Hong, she's got this graphic novel format down. She's also responsible for translating Anko's Bad Friends as well as Yeon-sik Hong's Oma's Table. Both so good. And with that, my month of reading Korean works in translation comes to a close. Much thanks to the Literature Translation Institute of Korea for sponsoring this and letting me send out some Korean works and translations to some lucky winners out there in the world. I'll be making a draw at the end of the month, contacting the winners, so good luck to you all. In the meantime, I'm going to transition to reading the Giller Long List. Once again, I've been asked to be a delegate for the Toronto International Festival of Authors coming up at the end of this month. And obviously, they've changed to a virtual format in this age of COVID, so it's over 200 events available anywhere in the world for free, featuring authors like Wade Davis, Scott Turow, Marilyn Robinson, Margaret Atwood, and most of the Giller Long List. So some fantastic events. You can register for any of them at festiveauthors.ca. I'll also have a link to that down below. So come out, check it out. I think it'll be well worth it. Anyway, that is it for me this week. I hope you all have a great week of reading, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.